How did India, a country once colonized and exploited under the same imperial system that bled Africa, become one of the continent's most essential partners in the 21st century? The story isn't just about trade deals or diplomatic visits. It's about shared scars, strategic alignment, and a new global order where the global South refuses to take instructions from anyone else. For decades, Africa's international relationships were shaped through a one-way lens. The West dictated, Africa complied. But that world is fading fast. What's emerging instead is a network of independent partnerships rooted in mutual respect and survival. And India, unlike most of Africa's traditional partners, understands that struggle intimately. Because India too was colonized. It too fought to reclaim dignity, culture, and control over its destiny. That shared experience matters. It builds a bridge no empire can replicate. When African leaders like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré speak about sovereignty and the need for Africa to control its own resources, it resonates deeply in India, not as rhetoric, but as recognition. India once walked that same path, standing up to a global order designed to keep it dependent, rising from poverty to strategic autonomy. And today, that journey has turned India into a symbol of what post-colonial nations can achieve when they stop asking for permission. But let's get specific. How did India move from solidarity slogans to becoming an essential partner for Africa? It didn't happen overnight. It started quietly, through people, connections, long before politics or profits got involved. In the 1960s and 70s, when most African nations were gaining independence, India sent doctors, teachers, and engineers, not armies. It offered scholarships through the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. African students studied in Delhi, Bangalore, and Pune. Many returned home as ministers, business leaders, and policymakers. These relationships planted roots that are now bearing fruit in ways few predicted. In recent years, India-Africa trade surged toward and has been reported to cross the $100 billion mark in fiscal year 2024-25. But what makes it different is structure. Unlike the old extractive models where Africa exported raw materials and imported dependency, India's partnerships are built increasingly on co-production, technology transfer, and shared industrial growth. Think of the Pan-African E-Network, launched by India in 2009 to connect African universities and hospitals via satellite. Think of solar projects in Mozambique, pharmaceutical factories in Kenya, digital payment systems spreading across West Africa, all built on Indian know-how. Yet this relationship isn't charity, and that's exactly why it works. Both sides know what they're getting. Africa gains a partner who brings technology without lectures. India gains access to markets, minerals, and geopolitical allies as it competes with China's dominance and the West's waning influence. In a world dividing into power blocks, Africa and India are choosing something different: cooperation without submission. It's also deeply symbolic because when you look at global forums, the United Nations, the G20, the BRICS Alliance, you see India consistently pushing for African representation. When the African Union was elevated to full G20 representation in 2023, India publicly backed the move, a clear signal of its diplomatic posture toward Africa. That wasn't a token gesture. It was a statement that the future of global governance can't be written without Africa in the room. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, understands that Africa isn't just a resource hub, it's the world's next growth engine. But beyond the economics, there's politics of identity. India wants to be seen as the voice of the global South. To do that credibly, it must stand shoulder to shoulder with Africa, not above it. That's why Indian diplomacy across Africa doesn't follow the patronizing tone you often hear from Western capitals. The narrative is different. It's about equals shaping the century together. Now, this doesn't mean the relationship is flawless. Some African observers worry that India might fall into the same pattern of prioritizing access to raw materials over industrial investment. Others criticize Indian firms for occasionally importing labor instead of hiring locally. These are valid points, But what makes this partnership resilient is dialogue. Unlike in neo-colonial structures where decisions are imposed from boardrooms in Paris or Washington, African governments negotiate with India on their own terms and walk away when terms don't fit. That balance of power is new, it's refreshing, and it's deeply African. Let's not forget, India's rise itself has been fueled by lessons Africa is now learning. When India liberalized its economy in the 1990s, it faced pressure from the same international lenders that once dictated African policies through structural adjustment programs. But India refused to surrender its policy space. It built homegrown industries, invested in its own scientists, and shielded its agriculture. Today, Africa's new generation of leaders, like Traoré, Assimi Goïta in Mali, or even Paul Kagame in Rwanda, are doing something similar, rejecting imported economic blueprints and choosing national interest first. India's trajectory shows that's not only possible, it's powerful. Consider the defense sector. Africa's military cooperation with India is expanding rapidly. From joint training programs to arms production, India supplies patrol vessels to Mauritius, surveillance aircraft to Seychelles, and defense technology to Mozambique. Yet it's not militarization for domination, it's security for sovereignty. Many African states are tired of being policed by outside powers under the pretext of peacekeeping. Indian partnerships, by contrast, build capacity instead of dependency. Culturally, too, the ties run deep. Bollywood has had a following across Africa for decades, from Lagos to Nairobi to Addis Ababa. But that soft power isn't just about movies. It's about emotional connection. Stories of resilience, family, struggle, and victory resonate across continents. It reminds Africans that we are not alone in this long arc of liberation. The fight for dignity is universal, and India's story mirrors Africa's in more ways than one. There's also a moral undercurrent here that's hard to ignore. Both Africa and India were told they'd never make it without Western aid or direction. Both proved that false. Both now look at each other as proof that the colonized can become architects of the future. That's not just inspiring, it's revolutionary. Still, the world is shifting fast. China's presence in Africa is massive and undeniable. The West is scrambling to rebrand itself as a partner, not a patron. So where does India fit in? Strategically, right in the middle. It offers Africa something others don't: balance. Not the sharp edge of Western conditionality, not the heavy footprint of Chinese loans, but a pragmatic middle ground rooted in shared experience. It's this balance that makes India essential. Not dominant, not savior, essential. The future of Africa-India relations will depend on what both sides do next. If African nations leverage Indian investment to build local industries, digital economies, and education systems, this partnership could redefine South-South cooperation for generations. If India, in turn, continues treating Africa as a co-equal partner rather than a passive market, it can anchor an entirely new model of development, one driven by solidarity, not extraction. We're already seeing glimpses of that. In Ethiopia, Indian firms are helping develop industrial parks that employ thousands. In Tanzania, Indian companies are working with local partners to build fertilizer plants that cut dependence on imports. In Ghana and Nigeria, Indian pharmaceuticals are making life-saving drugs more affordable. These are tangible nation-shaping impacts, not handouts, but handshakes. Even in energy, the collaboration is strategic. Africa's vast solar potential meets India's renewable expertise. Projects like the International Solar Alliance, co-founded by India, invite African nations to join a future of clean, decentralized power. That's more than environmental cooperation. It's economic liberation, because energy independence means political independence. When you connect the dots, a pattern emerges. Africa and India are not just trading goods, they're trading philosophies. The philosophy of standing tall after centuries of subjugation, the belief that development doesn't require imitation, the conviction that the South can rise without waiting for permission from the North. Of course, this vision demands vigilance. For Africa, the lesson of history is clear. No partner, no matter how friendly, should be trusted without accountability. True sovereignty means choosing alliances from strength, not desperation. India's partnership will remain essential only if it respects Africa's autonomy, honors fair trade, and contributes to the continent's self-reliance. And to India's credit, that's exactly the kind of partnership it says it wants. What we're witnessing today isn't just diplomacy, it's the rebuilding of a world that colonialism tried to erase. A world where the descendants of the oppressed write the rules of cooperation. A world where technology, trade, and solidarity flow south to south, not top down. So when someone asks how India became an essential partner for Africa, the answer isn't hidden in statistics or summits. It's in the deeper truth that two civilizations, both wounded by empire, have chosen to heal through mutual empowerment. Africa doesn't need saviors. India doesn't need validation. Together they need only one thing: the courage to keep walking the sovereign path they've begun, shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward, unshaken. Because the story of the 21st century will not be written by the powers that once ruled the world. It will be written by those who refuse to be ruled again. And right now, Africa and India are holding the pen. What do you think? Is India truly becoming Africa's most reliable partner for a sovereign future? Or does the continent still need to define that partnership on its own terms? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's hear the voice of Africa on this one.